Linguistic Diversity in English for Speakers of Other Languages, Assignment 3.1. When given this project, I thought about my classroom experience with students who do not speak English as their native tongue. Particularly this year, I had one student. He moved here from Mexico, and he spoke Spanish, and English was his second language, and he had very limited proficiency in English. So it was a big struggle for us this year in trying to break down that language barrier. So as I designed this project and thought about this project, he was always in my mind as I was reading and thinking about the different parts of English speakers and how difficult it is to not have English be your native language but expected to go to school in a predominantly English speaking culture. So one of the videos, it discussed that there is legislation passed for ESL learners, and there was one particular little boy who really stood out to me when he was speaking. He said, in class one day I was asking a question. She couldn't understand me and she didn't know what to do, and I just forgot my question. That stuck out for me mostly because I've been in that situation. I've had students where they are not proficient in English, and they would talk to me and I would have to ask multiple times for them to clarify what they were asking. And I felt very guilty not being able to understand what they were trying to ask me. And I felt as an educator, I was dropping the ball for them. So 10% of students are limited English proficient, but issues arise because there are not enough teachers. And I wholeheartedly agree with this statement, just because I feel like as in all my training as a teacher and all my education courses, I have never truly learned what I can do to make it easier for ESL students. And I do realize that they have support educators and they have teachers that are, their sole job is to help them be successful. But at the same time, I know there, at least at the school I work at, there is two ESL teachers for 60 students. So there's really no way that they are getting adequate education or adequate help. So some tips to teach ESL students. Number one, like any student, it's important to know your student and their experience and their educational experience. So it's really important to know, first off, what is their proficiency in English? How long have they been in English or in English speaking schools? How long have they been in the United States? It's also important that you need to know about their family life, because if they have like a one-bedroom apartment for 6 of them, it might be very difficult, and that it might not always be easy for them to be successful if they have their family life is a struggle. Number 2, speak, write, reading, and listen daily. So we need to incorporate all these skills. So speak to them in English and speak to them in the content. Have them write in the content. Have them read in the content. And have them listen to English. Number 3, increase your understanding of social and academic English language. So socially, that means what are maybe like not necessarily slang terms, but what is the social ability of their students to speak in English? Just because you know that there is a difference between social language and academic language. So how can you help them socially and obviously academically? What words do they need to know? What words in the content area do they need to know? And 4, know how your students will be assessed in both content areas in the state. So how will you individually assess them, and how will your state assess them, and how can you prepare them for that assessment? Number 5, assess visuals like menus or bus schedules. One of the best things that you can do for an ESL student is to give them real-life examples. I think we've all at some point have been in a language class and we are given these sets of words and phrases that we need to know, but the question always was in my mind was, how am I going to use this in real life? What can I do to use this in real life? And looking at menus, of course you're going to have to maybe go to a restaurant at some point in your life and order from a menu, or you might not have access to a car, so looking at a bus schedule, knowing how to read a bus schedule will be super important. 6, be sure to know your students' level of proficiency in order to provide better scaffolding. So if you know that they've been in the United States for several years and they're becoming more proficient, you might not need as much scaffolding as if you would have a student who this is maybe their second or third year at an English-speaking school and English is still very much a struggle. So it's important to know what levels they are at so you can provide the appropriate help. And number 7, collaborate, collaborate, collaborate. You as a teacher don't always know best. There are other teachers that might know how to do something better. And it's always important to reach out and ask them, what can I do? What do you do? How can we make this better and easier for them? So technology and ESL. So we have a unique situation going on where our current generation, they're digital natives. So they understand the digital world far better than those previous to us. They were born in technology, they live on technology, so they have quite an understanding of how to be a part of social media, how to use computers, iPads. So technology can enhance the learning process for ESL students, such as listening and verbal skills. So wikis, this is probably one of the best uses of technology because it creates a community of content learners. It can also focus on making connections to digital literacy and language for ESL students. So you can create a wiki space for your ESL learners, and that way they could talk to each other, develop their skills together while learning how to speak English as well. Wiki is really easy to manipulate and really work towards making a better understanding of the English language. So I teach social studies, so I think it's really important to look at what struggles and what challenges do ESL students have in social studies. And a lot of this made sense to me. I never sat down and thought about it until this assignment. So first and foremost, and this was kind of a dumb moment for me, why did I not see this from the start? We all grew up on U.S. history. From the time we were entering a social studies classroom, we started learning about U.S. history, geography, and current events. We have this prior knowledge. So when we get to, well, for me particularly, when you get to 10th grade U.S. history, you know this. You have some sort of background knowledge on this. And students who are ESL students that come in from different countries, they don't really know U.S. history, and that's sort of a duh factor there too, because they would obviously be learning about their country, their customs, their history. So to expect them to have this prior background knowledge that everyone else has, it was a little ignorant and of me to assume that. Number 2, little to no familiarity with content terminology. Kind of going back to number 1, a lot of the content terminology that you see is from the background. So just to give an example, like when I did a World War I lesson plan or topic, I was talking about the reasons for World War I, and one of them was alliance. And they might not necessarily understand what an alliance is or what militarism is. Number 3, history is in the past tense with passive voice and complex sentences. So we know, obviously we've had spoken English since the time we could start speaking, and we understand what it means to talk in past tense, that things happen in past tense, like World War I happened in 1914, and the United States entered in 1916, 17. And so with that, we understand that we have to speak in past tense, but ESL students, so they don't necessarily understand that they might still be just trying to master the present tense. So how can I make a change in my social studies classroom? Number 1, I need to focus on more important things, reasoning for being the biggest, not necessarily dates. So maybe instead of focusing on what year we entered World War I, focus on why we entered World War I. 2, introduce vocabulary and review and make it relevant. So this is true with anyone. With any student, I need to introduce what the vocabulary term is, say it so they know how to say it, and tell them what it is, and then continue to review it and make it relevant. I think the biggest thing and the best way to remember vocabulary is to have them make personal connections. So my example here is alliances, go over the definition, and do a class demo and continue to review. 3, connect content to current events and experiences. So I need to make connections about alliances from World War I to maybe alliances today. Maybe make the connection of UN with ISIS issues. And number 4, incorporate technology. I need to use multiple means of technology like games, images, videos, because they are of the digital age and they understand media better than we do, and they can incorporate it and make it to use it to their advantage. All right, this is my assignment 3.1, Linguistics, Diversity, and English for Speakers of Other Languages. Thank you.